Testing, testing, one, two, three. This is Dr. Minarsik, and I will be dictating approximately 500 pathology lectures. And I figure it's probably about 500 because there's 29 chapters in Robbins. Each one takes about 3 hours on the average. And YouTube will limit me to 10 minutes, so I'll probably spend about 4 or 5 sections per lecture. If you multiply that out by the whole 1,400 page book, I think we're going to do about 500 10-minute lectures. And we're going to start out like the book does with chapter 1, the first 10 chapters being the general pathology, and the last 19 chapters being systemic pathology. I've done this several times already, and it's starting to bore me and be very repetitive. And I know you students never come to class, so I thought I would also put it on YouTube in PowerPoint format, so you could just look at it at 3 in the morning with a can of beer, maybe in bed with your girlfriend or boyfriend, rather than put on your clothes and come to class. So let's start out with pathology. The first chapter is called Cell Adaptations, Cell Injury, Cell Death. Each chapter has about 50 pages, and each chapter will have about 100 PowerPoints, and I could probably do maybe 10, 20, 30 PowerPoints at a crack. Let's see how this goes. Whether I do all 500 or whether I give up will depend on your comments from YouTube. Let's move on. And every time you see a PowerPoint that has a yellow fluorescent highlighting, these are the most important points and concepts. And here are the next 3 slides will show you the main objectives for the chapter. And I want to emphasize that I don't want to just be here to help you pass your boards. You know what? Passing the boards and learning pathology are two completely different things. I am here to teach you pathology. I don't give a damn about the boards. I have nothing but contempt for the boards. And I guess I'm allowed to say it because I have my own school here now on YouTube. But let's talk about the objectives of the first chapter. We're going to talk about the 3 anatomic types of diseases classically. There's always some exceptions, but all diseases are either degenerations, inflammations, or neoplasms. We're going to talk about the plasia and the trophy brothers too. Hypo, hyper, blah, 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 meta. We're going to talk about the different factors of cell injury and death, which ones are reversible, which ones are not reversible, and we're going to skip a lot of the crazy chemistry and go into the real conceptual meat of the thing. We're going to talk about the pathologic mechanisms at the subcellular level regarding mitochondria, calcium, free radicals, cell membranes, ATP. We're going to talk about the difference between the concept of apoptosis and necrosis. We're going to talk about subcellular responses to injury with the various organelles. Last but not least, we're going to talk about intracellular accumulations of all types, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, pigments, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, we're going to make a little philosophical concept of why cells die or get injured and why people get injured or die. So here's an easy thing to remember. Pathology is the study of disease. Pathos meaning suffering from Greek, and logos meaning study. There are 2 kinds of pathology classically. One is general pathology, disease processes, pretty much talking about the 3 things we talked about: degeneration, inflammation, neoplasia, but also systemic pathology. Most of your curricula now are being divided into systems rather than disciplines. And I always kind of remember that there are 10 systems in the body, you know, respiratory, renal, blah, blah, blah. And the last 19 out of 29 chapters of Robbins are devoted to systemic path, while the first 10 are devoted to general path. Let's talk about the four things that are present for every disease. If you don't have these four things, you don't have a disease. You may have a syndrome or an observation or this or that. But in order for something to be a bona fide disease, it has to have four things. First of all, it has to have a cause, or what we call etiology. Sometimes we don't exactly know the precise etiology, if there is such a thing, so we talk about risk factors instead. Every disease has to have a pathogenesis, and this is the hardest of the four concepts to understand. Pathogenesis is defined as the insidious development of changes at the cellular and subcellular level which occur before the actual clinical expression of the disease. And of course, the clinical expression is here, number 4. We all know what that is. Those are signs and symptoms. In addition, the fourth thing which every disease needs to be a true disease is a morphology. It has to have an abnormal anatomy. Usually that's at the cellular level, but it could be radiologic, it could be biochemical. So go out and get your tattoos, folks, because when you study pathology, you're going to have to know on your 4 tattoos, it has to have an etiology, a pathogenesis, a morphology, and a clinical expression. And etiology could be the actual cause, if there is such a thing, or sometimes when we think we know the cause, we go back in time and we find out that it's not as easy as we thought. Sometimes, mathematically speaking, we just like to mention risk factors, which are not precise causes, but they're related to the cause. For example, the 4 major risk factors of atherosclerosis versus a precise cause. Pathogenesis is the sequence of events from the initial stimulus of whatever causes the disease to the ultimate expression of the disease. So the stimulus occurs, changes occur within your body, and then ultimately you have a clinical expression. Well, that time lag between the so-called cause and the expression and the sequence of things that are happening on the cellular level is called the pathogenesis. Every disease has to have a morphology, and I would not want any of you ever to write a prescription without being able to recognize that morphology. Unfortunately, this is the part of pathology that has suffered throughout the years, and people are very good at rattling off acronyms, but they fail to understand what's happening. And the type of morphology most pathologists are fond of are microscopic abnormal anatomy. Gross pictures are really nice too. The radiologists love radiologic morphology, and of course, this is all reflected as ultimately as an abnormal anatomy of molecules, isn't it? So you could think of morphology on any level. In most cases, and I hope you will agree with this. If not, I'll eventually convince you, is that when you think of a disease, you have to think of an abnormal arrangement of cells. And that is what we see under the microscope. And sure, it could be molecular, sure, it could be radiologic, but every time we talk about a disease, even though it has 4 classical factors, I want you to remember that ultimately there's going to be an abnormal morphology. So, you know what? Because we're approaching the 10-minute zone right now, let's quit this and we'll pick up on slide number 12 out of 65 on the next movie. Bye-bye.